"He's such a burden," my mother declared about my son as I lay in the hospital. "You're not my financial burden anymore," I replied. "Now I've cut them off." I stood in the hallway of my childhood home, staring at the photos lining the wall. My sister's graduation, her wedding, her first child. My parents beamed in every shot. My own milestones were conspicuously absent. The familiar knot formed in my stomach. After 35 years, you'd think I'd be immune to it. My mother's voice floated from the kitchen. "Olivia, is that you? Come help me with these dishes." I hesitated. I hadn't come to help with dishes. I'd come to finally set boundaries. Walking into the kitchen, I found my mother frantically arranging appetizers. Sue's promotion party, of course. My sister had been made department manager at the local bank, a position she'd gotten through my father's connections. "Could you finish these while I get ready?" She didn't wait for my answer, wiping her hands on a towel. "Your father picked up the wrong crackers. Sue likes the sesame ones, not plain." I nodded, taking her place at the counter. Same old story, different day. My phone buzzed, a text from Helen, my ex-sister-in-law. "Did you tell them yet?" I hadn't. "How do you tell your parents you're cutting them off financially after years of support? How do you explain that their grandson, their only grandson, had drawn a family tree for school and hadn't included them?" The front door slammed. My father's heavy footsteps approached. "Olivia," he acknowledged, barely looking at me. "Where's your mother?" "Sue will be here in an hour." My chest tightened. "Getting ready," he nodded, disappearing into the living room without another word. I arranged crackers on a platter, remembering all the times I'd stood in this kitchen hopping for approval that never came. The scholarship to UCLA, the promotion to senior analyst, Dennis's birth. None of it had ever been enough to shift their attention from Sue. My sister was their miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages when they'd given up hope. I was just the first attempt. The practice run. I'd spent decades trying to earn what Sue had been given freely: their love, their attention, their pride. When Mike left me for his coworker 3 years ago, I'd hoped they might finally step up. Their daughter, suddenly a single mother, surely needed support. Instead, they'd asked if I'd contributed to the breakdown of my marriage, if I'd worked too much, if I'd neglected my wifely duties. It was Mike's parents who had swooped in to help with Dennis. Helen and Dan, technically no longer my in-laws, had become my real family, watching Dennis every afternoon, taking him for weekends when I had to travel for work, loving him unconditionally. My parents, meanwhile, had been too busy, always too busy, until 6 months ago. The change had been sudden: weekly calls asking about Dennis, invitations to Sunday dinners, offers to babysit. I'd been suspicious but hopeful. Maybe they'd finally seen what they were missing. Maybe they'd finally decided to be grandparents. Then came Sue's promotion, and suddenly the truth was clear. They hadn't changed, they just needed money. My mother returned to the kitchen, dressed in a new blouse I'd paid for. "Did you finish the appetizers? Sue will be here soon." I nodded, pushing the platter toward her. "We need to talk." Her expression changed. Wariness replaced excitement. "About what? Can it wait until after the party?" It could, but it wouldn't. "I'm stopping the payments," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The color drained from her face. "What payments?" As if she didn't know, as if I hadn't been covering their car payment for the past 5 years, as if I hadn't paid for the roof repair last summer, the property taxes, the trip to Hawaii. "All of them." My hands trembled, but I kept them flat on the counter. "The car, the credit card, the house insurance, all of it." She stared at me, mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Why would you do that after everything we've done for you?" The laugh escaped before I could stop it. Short, bitter. "What exactly have you done for me? We raised you, we put food on the table." The bare minimum. She was claiming credit for the bare minimum. "When Mike left, who helped me? When Dennis had pneumonia and I needed someone to take him to follow-up appointments, who was there? When I got promoted, who celebrated with me? Not them. Never them." My father appeared in the doorway, frowning. "What's going on?" My mother turned to him, voice pitched high with indignation. Olivia says she's cutting us off after everything we've done. His face darkened. Is this about the emergency? We explained that. It's about everything. The words came out in a rush now. All the hurt, the disappointment, the realization that I'd been buying their affection and still getting shortchanged. It's about Dennis calling Helen grandma because she acts like one. It's about you missing his birthday to go to Sue's timeshare. It's about me having emergency surgery and you refusing to pick up your grandson because Sue had a party. 3 weeks ago, appendicitis. I'd been rushed to the hospital, delirious with pain. My only thought had been Dennis, alone at after-school care with no one to pick him up. I'd called my parents first. They'd been my first call. We're at Sue's promotion dinner, my mother had said, voice tight with annoyance. Can't his father take him? Mike was in Seattle with his new wife. I'd explained this, barely coherent through the pain. Well, we can't leave now. Sue would be devastated. He's just such a burden sometimes. A burden, my son, their grandson, a burden. Helen had answered on the first ring, had dropped everything. Had not only picked up Dennis but had stayed at the hospital with me through the night, Dennis asleep on the waiting room couch she'd pushed together to make a bed. That was the moment I knew the difference between obligation and love, the difference between family by blood and family by choice. My father's voice pulled me back to the present. You're being dramatic. We couldn't leave Sue's dinner. You know how important it was to her. More important than their grandson being alone and scared, more important than their daughter being rushed into surgery. I'm done, I said quietly. No more money, no more pretending. You don't get to use me when it's convenient and discard me when it's not. My mother's face crumpled, not with sadness, with calculation, but the car payment is due next week and your father's medication. Sue's new salary could cover it, or they could finally draw from the retirement account they'd been preserving while I subsidized their lifestyle. Not my problem anymore. The front door opened. Sue's voice called out, bright with excitement. Mom, Dad, I bought champagne. My cue to leave, I grabbed my purse from the counter. Olivia, wait, my mother hissed. You can't do this to us. But I could, and I was. I passed Sue in the hallway, her face registering surprise at seeing me. Olivia, I didn't know you were coming to my party. I wasn't. I'd just been removing the last of my emotional investment in people who had never really seen me. Congratulations on the promotion, I said, meaning it. Sue's success wasn't the problem. It never had been. The problem was our parents' inability to celebrate both their daughters. Confusion crossed her face. Thanks. Are you leaving already? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Let them explain. Let them deal with the consequences of their choices. The drive home was surreal. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't sad tears. They were relief. The weight I'd carried for decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given was finally gone. Dennis was at Helen's. My ex-mother-in-law had texted photos of them making cookies. Flour on his cheeks, delight in his eyes, love in every pixel. Family isn't about obligation, it isn't about blood, it's about who shows up, who stays, who makes you feel like you belong exactly as you are. 3 months passed, no calls from my parents, no guilt-laden texts, nothing. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone lit up with my mother's number. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. Hello, Olivia. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk about this situation. The situation being their financial reality without my support. There's nothing to discuss. A pause, then Sue refuses to help us, says we need to learn financial responsibility. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. The car was repossessed yesterday. The mortgage is 2 months behind. Not my problem, not anymore. I'm sorry to hear that. And part of me was, the part that had been conditioned to feel responsible for their happiness, for their comfort. You can't just abandon us like this. We're your parents. Biology, not behavior. They'd never been parents in the ways that mattered. I have to go. Dennis has soccer practice. Olivia, wait. I ended the call, blocked the number. Across the kitchen, Dennis was carefully drawing on a piece of construction paper, his school project, a family tree. "How's it coming, buddy?" I asked, peering over his shoulder. He'd drawn Helen and Dan at the top, labeled Grandma and Grandpa. Below them, Mike and me, labeled Dad and Mom. And at the bottom, himself, no Sue, no maternal grandparents. "Is this everyone in our family?" I asked carefully. He nodded, utterly certain. "These are the people who love us." Simple, profound, true. That night, after Dennis was asleep, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine. The spring air was cool against my skin. I thought about inheritance. Not money or property, the emotional inheritance we receive from our parents, the beliefs about our own worth, the patterns we perpetuate. My parents had inherited their own damage, their own beliefs about love being conditional, about children owing parents rather than the other way around. But cycles can be broken, patterns disrupted. Dennis would inherit something different from me, the knowledge that love isn't earned, that family is chosen, that showing up matters more than sharing DNA. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Dan's making his famous chili on Sunday. You and Dennis in." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it." This was my inheritance now, not damage or debt or obligation, but choice, connection, love freely given and gratefully received. For the first time in my life, I felt rich with what really mattered. Looking back, I could trace the pattern clearly now, the constant striving, the desperate attempts to be seen, the way I'd measured my worth through their approval, or rather the lack of it. Each achievement had been a plea: look at me, love me, see me. My childhood bedroom walls had been covered with academic awards, spelling bee championships, math competition trophies, all gathering dust while my parents attended Sue's soccer games, her dance recitals, her average academic ceremonies. When I got into UCLA with a full scholarship, my father had frowned at the acceptance letter. "California, that's so far away, and who's going to help your mother around the house?" Not Sue, never Sue, she was too busy being the center of their universe. I went anyway, put myself through grad school, built a career in finance, made enough money to never need anyone else's help. Then I met Mike, handsome, charming Mike, with his kind eyes and his way of making me feel like the most important person in any room. His family had embraced me immediately. Holiday dinners where my opinion was valued. Weekend barbecues where my stories were heard. His mother, Helen, called just to check in. His father, Dan, helped me change my oil. It felt foreign, this unconditional acceptance, this genuine interest in my life. When we got married, my parents had complained about the venue, the date, the food. Sue had been my maid of honor, looking bored throughout the ceremony. They'd left early, citing Sue's early morning appointment the next day. Mike's parents had stayed until the end, had helped clean up, had hugged me goodnight like I was already their daughter. Dennis's birth should have been a turning point, my parents' first grandchild, but they'd visited only once, staying less than an hour, my mother awkwardly holding the baby before passing him back to me. "He looks like Mike," she'd said, as if that explained her distance. Helen and Dan had been different. They'd brought meals, had offered to stay overnight during those exhausting early weeks, had held Dennis for hours so I could shower, nap, feel human again. When Mike left, a text message, not even the dignity of a conversation, it was Helen who found me sobbing on the bathroom floor. Helen who packed a bag for Dennis. Helen took us both to her house while I tried to make sense of my collapsing marriage. My parents' response had been a single phone call. My mother's voice tinged with something like satisfaction. "Men don't like women who prioritize careers, I told you that." As if my success was the problem, as if I deserved to be abandoned. The divorce had been ugly, Mike fighting for assets but not custody, wanting freedom without responsibility. Helen and Dan caught in the middle, loving their son but furious with his choices. "You're still our family," Dan had told me, his voice firm with conviction. "That doesn't change. Dennis is our grandson, you're his mother. The math is simple. Simple for them, impossible for my own parents." I'd turned to them finally when the legal bills mounted. When the stress of single motherhood and full-time work and ongoing divorce proceedings became too much, I'd asked for help, just temporary, just until things settled. My father had written a check, small, grudging. Don't make a habit of this, we're not a bank. But the next month, when their car broke down, they'd called without hesitation. Could I help just this once, just until things settled? That once became years, their requests growing, my boundaries eroding, the secret hope that if I just gave enough, did enough, they might finally love me the way they loved Sue. Pathetic, so transparently desperate, but I couldn't stop until the emergency, until he's such a burden. Until I finally saw the transaction for what it was, my money buying their temporary attention, never their love, never their genuine care. The realization broke something in me, but in that breaking there was freedom. I didn't need to earn love, I already had it. From Dennis, from Helen and Dan, from friends who showed up, from colleagues who respected me, from the family I'd chosen rather than the one I'd been born into. A week after I'd left my parents' house, Sue had called. Unusual, we spoke maybe twice a year, our relationship civil but distant. What did you say to Mom and Dad? Her voice accusatory, defensive. They're freaking out about money. I'd explained simply, no more support, no more enabling. They had their golden child, let her provide now. Her silence had been telling. They said you're being selfish, that you're punishing them for the past. Was it selfish to stop setting myself on fire to keep others warm? Was it punishment to finally enforce consequences for years of emotional neglect? I'm not punishing anyone, I'm just done pretending. Sue had sighed, the sound tired, familiar. They're not going to change, you know, they've always been like this. A rare moment of honesty between us, an acknowledgement of the dynamic we'd both been trapped in, her as the favored child, me as the forgotten one. I know they won't change, but I have. She'd been quiet again, then, good for you, simple words, but perhaps the first genuine thing she'd said to me in years. After we hung up, I wondered about Sue, if she felt the weight of their expectations differently, if being the favorite came with its own burdens, its own kinds of invisible chains. It didn't excuse her participation in my exclusion, but it helped me understand it. We'd both been playing roles assigned to us before we could choose otherwise. Now, months after cutting financial ties, I was beginning to understand what freedom really meant. Not just freedom from obligation, but freedom from seeking validation from people incapable of giving it. My worth had never been dependent on their recognition. My value was never tied to their approval. I'd always been enough. They simply hadn't been able to see it. Dennis bounded into the kitchen, interrupting my thoughts. Mom, Grandma Helen says she's making spaghetti for dinner. Can we go now? Grandma Helen, the title given freely, earned through love and presence and countless small acts of care. Sure, buddy, get your shoes. As he raced to the door, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this beautiful, resilient child, for the family we'd created out of choice rather than obligation, for the hard-won wisdom that had come from pain. Sometimes, the most valuable inheritances are the lessons we learn from those who hurt us. The determination to be different, to do better, to break the cycle. My parents had taught me exactly what kind of parent, what kind of person I didn't want to be, and for that, ironically, I was grateful. Driving to Helen and Dan's house, Dennis chattering happily beside me, I felt the final pieces click into place. The journey from desperate need to peaceful acceptance, from seeking external validation to finding it within myself. The weight of inheritance, the emotional debts, the generational patterns, the familial expectations had been heavy, but I'd put it down now, left it behind. What remained was lighter, cleaner, mine to define. Family, love, belonging, not as transactions or obligations or desperate attempts to prove worth, but as choices, made daily, made with intention, made with the quiet certainty that I was, finally, exactly where I belonged.